Hey, welcome back, guys. Welcome to another video. This is JC Diaz. In this video, I have a reaction I want to bring to you guys, and is from Piers Morgan interviewing Tucker Carlson. And in this occasion, they talk about what it is to be against the war with Iran. And a lot of people right now are calling other people who don't believe in the war anti-Semite, and they're calling them, they're saying that some people hate Jew people because they don't agree with the war. Then they believe that Israel is pushing the United States against into this war, like it's pushing the United States into this war. So let's go ahead and start the show, and we'll go straight to the video. And I hope you guys like this. I hope you guys like this reaction. Hey, welcome to my reaction video. This is JC Diaz. Guys, I'm excited for this reaction video. This is Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan. So we are gonna go ahead and start right away. We won't waste your time. I'm excited about this one. We are going to react to Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan talking about the war in Iran and the influence of Israel over the United States. So let's go ahead and get started.
Going to war is the gravest decision a leader can make. It's a decision which by design causes death at scale. It reduces the quality of life for your own people, at least for a while, and it inevitably unleashes chaos, both economic and political, which is inherently not within your control. That's why most leaders carefully construct a case for war based on the costs and the rewards. Amid the suffering, they see great benefit in the national interest. Could it expand our territory or our control? Does it eliminate a genuine threat, which makes our country safer? Will it make us more powerful in our own geographic neighborhood? Is it popular with our people? Does it strengthen our national unity and pride? For President Trump right now, the answer to all these questions is no. For Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who says he's dreamed of this for 40 years, it could be yes on all counts. It's therefore perfectly reasonable to believe that Israel led the US into this war in Iran, not least because Marco Rubio said it and Antony Blinken said Netanyahu tried the same strategy with the two previous presidents. But it
Yes, the influence of Israel over the United States regarding this war is out of this world. Like, they tried the same with when Biden was president. They tried the same when Obama was president. Even when Nixon was president, they were still trying. And everybody said, no, we don't need this war. And somehow they got to convince President Trump that this war is necessary, which baffles my mind because usually Trump is a pretty confident person, he does what he wants to do. He will listen to other people, but at the end, he will do what he wants to do. So the fact that he was pulled into this war is amazing. But let's continue watching, guys.
doesn't answer the question of why President Trump went along with it and why now. The answer could simply be oil, as it's often been before. Prices are swinging wildly at the moment, but the president said this.
Prices are coming down very substantially. Oil will be coming down. That's just a matter of war. That happens you can almost predict it. I would say it went up a little bit less than we thought. It's going to come down more than anybody understands.
As it stands, Iran has only tightened its grip on the Strait of Hormuz. It's now exporting more of its own oil than before the war began, while making it more expensive for everybody else. And if the US always planned to take control, to conquer the strait and leave Israel to police it, why did nobody say that? Trump was crystal clear about the unashamedly selfish benefits of raiding Venezuela. He's made a similar case about Greenland, whether you agree with it or not. So why the muddled messaging now? It's impossible to disconnect it from the bigger picture about his final term, the defense of MAGA's legacy and the battle for its future. The so-called MAGA war was red hot long before the Iran war began. Trump will be well aware that one side is extremely skeptical about Israel because it's a direct threat to a very literal interpretation of America first. Fix this country before sending bombs to fix everybody else's. The other side would rather you didn't talk about Israel at all, unless it's to express unconditional support. Israel, they believe, is a key overseas territory in a new American empire which rules the world with muscle. That battle of ideas is going nowhere fast, which is why presidential hopeful Ted Cruz said this.
I believe Tucker Carlson is the single most dangerous demagogue in this country. And I'll tell you,
This guy, Ted Cruz, is the most condescending senator I've ever met. I haven't met him personally, but his vibe, like every time I watch him on news, you can tell this guy is a fake. Like he has this negative, I don't know, I have like this negative vibe from him every single time I watch his interviews. Especially the last interview with when Tucker Carlson literally wiped the floor with this man, and now he's throwing shade at Tucker Carlson. Maybe you should do a better job of being a senator. Maybe you should actually represent your constituents instead of representing the country of Israel. Maybe you do a better job and learn a little bit about the countries you are trying to overtake, and you wouldn't look like a fool like the last time you looked like a fool. But let's continue.
I made the decision that I'm going to take him on head directly.
Well, Tucker Carlson rejoins me now on Uncensored. Tucker, how are you?
It's such a serious topic, and then you play the Ted Cruz clip, and I laugh. He already took me on head-to-head last summer.
You know, guys, it's funny how every time I see Tucker Carlson laugh, right? He reminds me of a little kid who was just giving a whole bag of candy, and he laughs. He's like, you know what I mean? He laughs like a kid who is so happy because he just got a big bag of candy. I like that. I like that smile.
I'm not running for president.
No homo, by the way.
So I don't know why he would be running for president against me. But thank you. And Piers, as I have said publicly a number of times, you have been, even though we disagree on a lot of core issues, you have been a champion for free speech for years, especially as free speech, the allowable window of free speech shrinks, and you've been one of the world's great champions of it. So I'm not surprised that you're getting attacked for that. But good for you for what you're doing. Thank you.
Well, we're going to come to some of those attacks a little later. Just in relation to Ted Cruz, I mean, I watched that interview that you did with him where he had no idea how many people live in Iran. And as you rightly pointed out, that ought to be probably a basic prerequisite of knowing about a country before you may wish to, for example, attack a country. And it may be that him now responding in the way that he is because you embarrassed him so much that day. But in relation to his claim that you are the single most dangerous demagogue in America, how do you respond to that?
Well, I'm honored that I beat Mamdani and AOC and the entire Democratic Party. I mean, this is a conservative Republican senator from Texas telling you that I am the most dangerous. Well, why is that? I have no allegiance to any foreign country, only my own, the one in which I was born, unlike Ted Cruz, who's from Canada. Why would I be the most dangerous? In fact, I'm not a demagogue. I don't seek to divide people. It pains me to see people divided. It's against my religion, and it's bad for my country. He's mad at me, because his interview didn't go well, as you said. That's true, I think. But he's actually most mad at me because I'm criticizing our alliance with Israel, and I'm not doing that because I'm getting anything out of it. I'm certainly not. Or because I hate Israel. I don't and never have. But because I don't think it helps the United States. And I've been saying that for the last year to increasing irritation from agents of Israel like Ted Cruz, And now this war kind of proves the point. Unfortunately, I wish we hadn't come to this, but this is so destructive to American national interest that it's hard to believe destroying American national interest, weakening the United States, wasn't part of the point. How could it not have been? And the last point I would make about relevant knowledge of a country you seek to overthrow is that, like, looking at maps doesn't tell you the whole story, but it tells you part of the story. And at the eastern end,
I think, like Tucker Carlson is saying, I believe this war is detrimental to the United States. We don't have anything to gain from this war and pretty much everything to lose, because Iran has now attacked over 19 countries that had nothing to do with the war, just because they're going after U.S. military bases. So I think we are creating more chaos than what we are trying to fix a problem in the Middle East. So that's my personal opinion. If you guys believe other way, any other way, please comment below. Just let me know. I'm open. I'm an open person. You can comment and just let me know how you feel about the issue. Do you agree with the war in Iran, or you don't agree? Also, please hit like, share, and subscribe. Let's help the algorithm pick up this video so we can keep making great content for you guys. But let's continue.
Of the Persian Gulf is a strait called Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's energy flows, and a huge percentage of its fertilizer and sulfur and petrochemicals and things that we need for civilization. And if you shut that down, the world economy tanks. And by the way, if you take out the government that controls one half of that strait, and that government is replaced by warring tribes, a civil war, then you open it up to piracy. And anybody with a $400 drone can prevent an oil tanker from getting through the strait. So chaos is actually the enemy of commerce.
See, that's what I just said. I just said we are creating more chaos in that region than we are fixing chaos in that region. I think that our presence over there just makes things worse, and we are letting Israel drag us into a war that we have nothing to gain. We have nothing to gain from this war. Most of those countries hate us anyways, and here we are going back over there and going to war with one of the countries who surrounds that region, making it worse for us and, for Israel and everybody else.
Are, terrorist regimes, but chaos is actually even more of a threat because you cannot meaningfully negotiate with pirates, even with the Houthis. So, what was the plan? What was the plan to overthrow the government of Iran, or even attack it in a meaningful way without jeopardizing core American interests? And the answer is there never was a plan, because the people who thought this up don't care about core American interests. And the net effect is to hand the Middle East to the Chinese, which is what is in process of happening. And I hope, for the sake of the United States and the world, that we can stop that. But the truth is, our real allies in the region are the 6 Gulf monarchies that control a lot of.
Hold on. So he is basically saying the Chinese will take over the Middle East, right? But the Chinese have been there already. This is nothing new. The Chinese are partners with Iran. Also, Russia is a partner with Iran. They buy their oil and they sell their goods in that region. So I don't know. Tucker Carlson definitely knows more than me about these issues. But I thought that China was already in that region anyways. What do you guys think? Please comment below.
The world's energy. And by the way, they're pro-American and decent people, as you know, because you and I had lunch there. This is a nice part of the world. It's being destroyed. Yeah, these are our allies. We have bases in these countries for a reason, not just to protect Israel, but to protect the Straits of Hormuz. We haven't been able to defend these countries to the extent that I think they thought we would be able to. We've moved a lot of the anti-missile defense that might have protected them to Israel. And so for them, at the end of all of this, the question is going to be, do we allow the Americans to come back and occupy bases on the Persian Gulf? What's in it for us? We just got bombed for it. No one protected us. Our energy infrastructure is damaged. Our economy is offline for months.
See, that Exactly what I just said. We are creating more chaos in this region. And imagine being the president, and now you got to listen to all these countries, all the leaders of these countries, pretty much calling you every day, sending you emails saying, "What are you doing? You're causing Iran to attack us." So I bet you the president is getting an earful of all these different countries surrounding Iran, and I'm just surprised that we let ourselves, or the government let themselves get dragged into a war that has nothing, absolutely nothing to gain for the American people.
We rebuild it. In the case of Dubai, it's a branding disaster. Like, there's no upside. And so at that point, the Chinese, the world's largest economy, kind of sat this out on the sidelines, said basically nothing, maybe called on to negotiate some kind of peaceful resolution to this. The Chinese, not the US, the Chinese. And then it naturally follows that China, which is the largest trading partner of every country on both sides of the Persian Gulf, would become the dominant power in the Persian Gulf. It would become Chinese. So, like, if you thought about this for 2 minutes before advocating for it, you might arrive at that conclusion, or at least conclude that's possible. That could happen if killing an 86-year-old religious leader didn't cause a spontaneous creation of a pro-Western government, which was apparently Ted Cruz's plan. If that didn't work, what would happen? Well, China would take over. And so anyone who didn't think that through is either not qualified to lead anything, including one half of the state of Texas. That person is probably actively working against America's core long-term interests. I mean, I don't know what other conclusion to reach.
It's been reported that you described the attacks when they first happened as evil and dangerous. Is that true? And is that a reflection of how you felt in that moment when you heard it had finally happened?
I got a text from someone I've known for many years right when I woke up and said, "What do you think of this?" And I said, "Evil and disgusting," actually is what I said. And I wrote it to John Carl, as a reporter at ABC News, who I've known since the early 90s. I had no idea this was some kind of on-the-record thing. He immediately went on breaking news and reported that. I had no desire to get that out there. I want to present my views in a more cogent, thoughtful way than just growling right when I wake up in response.
See, yes, I don't think that Tucker Carlson is the type of guy to, if you ask him a question, he's going to just give you an answer and not explain the reason for that specific answer. So for that person to, make his answer go viral without giving him a chance to explain what he was referring to at the time, I think it was bad. It was a mistake, because I've been watching Tucker Carlson for a while now, and every single time he gives an explanation, he gives an answer, he will give you an explanation to that answer. So he backs up his answer. That's what I'm trying to get at. So I don't think he was just saying, he said what he said, but he wasn't told, hey, this is going to go public. He thought that this was off the record. So let's go ahead. Let's keep going.
The news on my phone. But yes, I'm not running away from what I said. That was my initial reaction. I thought this was a disaster for American interests. I've thought that for many years. I've advocated against this war. I advocated against a war in Iran with Trump in the first Trump administration. So this is not a new position for me. I don't want to be vindicated in my fears, but unfortunately, I think the very few people who publicly oppose this are being vindicated, because I don't know what the case is that this is good for the United States. No one's even attempting to make that case. So instead they say, well, you hate Jews, to which I always say, well, not only do I not hate Jews, I think anti-Semitism is immoral. It's against my religion. Shut up, you hate Jews.
See, that's the thing. Nowadays, along with the cancel culture, you are not allowed to criticize Israel. You are not allowed to criticize anything that has to do with Israel, because people want to cancel you right away, and they call you an anti-Semite, and they say that you hate Jews. and so now you're not allowed to criticize Israel at all, and if you do, you'll get in trouble. I think the cancel culture in this country is getting worse by the day, and along with the rhetoric about not being able to openly criticize Israel, or you get in trouble. I think that is a big deal for our country, and it's unacceptable anyways.
And that is designed to do a bunch of different things, create more loyalty to Israel. There's so much anti-Semitism, you must be loyal to Israel. That's definitely one of the aims of this. Another is to imperil the person you're calling a Nazi, because Nazis get shot. Everyone knows that. And the third is to make people who disagree with you, or who platform those who might disagree with you, or Bibi Netanyahu, censor them, take them off the air, shut them up, silence them. Those are the points of it. But at no juncture have I ever met anybody who has laid out like a kind of reasonable, even slightly fantastical, but just like logical case for how this war will benefit the United States, make us stronger, safer, richer. I've never heard that case. I'm waiting for it. I would love to hear it. I'd love to believe it.
Yeah, this war doesn't benefit us at all. It's the opposite. We are spending $1 billion a day in this war. So today's day 13th, which means $13 billion have been spent in this war so far, and there's no end in sight. There's no end in sight. Do you know how many things we could have fixed in this country with $12 billion so far? We could give teachers a better salary. We could fix, or at least begin to fix, some of our infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I mean bridges in our country, and our bridges are getting old. The roads, the streets, we can help the homeless. We have so many things we need to take care of in our country, but instead we are spending $1 billion a day in a war that will not benefit us at all.
You were in the Oval Office with President Trump. You were photographed with him. You met him, I think, maybe 3 times in the months leading up to this war. And I presume you discussed the potential for war in Iran with him. Did you try and persuade him that this would be a terrible idea?
Of course. That's why I went 3 times in a month, 5 weeks maybe. Yeah, that's why I went. And I've known him a long time, as you have, and always gotten along with him, still get along with him. I still like him. I'll always like him no matter what happens, just because I like him as a guy. And I think he's trying his best. But in this case, I couldn't have an effect. I tried sincerely. I wasn't getting paid for it. It's coming, of course, at some reputational cost. No one wants to deal with being called a Nazi, screamed at, or threatened, or having your kids threatened, which has happened to me a lot. And no one wants to deal with that. But I just felt that this was so serious that it was worth doing whatever I could, because, my gosh, people could die. The balance of power globally could change. I've never supported the idea of an American empire, but we have one, and it's in retreat, but there's a way to manage that that's not damaging or profoundly damaging to the United States, the country that I actually live in, that I was born in. And this is not the way. Wars accelerate trends in progress. They bring massive and unexpected change. Every war does this. It's the nature of war. The second people start...
Wars are not good for our country. Wars are not good for the other countries. Wars are not good for humanity. Wars is the worst case scenario in every single situation. Every time you have a war, you will have casualties, you will have money spending, you will have people suffering, you will have children getting killed, you will have countries suffering, especially the civilians who have nothing to do with the war are the ones who are affected the most. Especially civilians who are innocent. They lose their family, they lose their children, they lose their moms, they lose their dad. There is absolutely nothing positive about war. Nothing positive positive about war. The only people who benefit from a war are the people who manufacture the guns and the bullets. Those are the only people who benefit from a war. The manufacturers of bullets and guns, because they get to sell billions and billions and billions in armament. Those are the only people who benefit from this.
Dying, all kinds of things you never anticipated will happen. And you can't control them. You lose control of the process. I've covered wars. I've certainly watched a lot, read about a lot. I'm not an expert, but I try to apply obvious lessons through history to present day realities. And that was the first thing I said to the president and anyone else who would listen. Once this starts, the world is going to find out exactly how strong we are, which is not something you necessarily want to reveal. An implied threat is much more effective than...
That's a fact, what he just said. You don't want to let the whole world know how strong we are or how weak we are. Now that we are in an all-out war with Iran, now you have China, Russia, and some of our enemies looking at us and saying, oh, so they have this much capability, have this much capability, they can do this much damage. So now they know our formula. Now they can go to work and create something that will fight our formula. So we are being more vulnerable when we go to an all-out war. We become more vulnerable because the rest of the world now gets to see the real United States in the middle of a war. So I absolutely agree with Tucker Carlson on this one. We are making ourselves more vulnerable, especially to China and Russia.
In other words, like, if we're squaring off for a fight and you look huge, you've been lifting a lot, I'm afraid of you, but I don't really know what you're capable of until I hit you or you hit me. And then we find out, and maybe it turns out you have no heart, and you lose. I mean, war is kind of the great reveal, and you don't necessarily want to go there,
Fact.
Especially if you've ruled the world without question for 80 years, and your capabilities have never really been tested. You haven't fought a big country really since 1953 when the Chinese entered the Korean War. So, you don't really know what you're capable of, and you don't really want to find out. Let's not find out. How's that? But I lost, so, as you can see.
Did you, when you were talking to him, Tucker, did you get a sense that he was on the fence about it, that he was potentially persuadable, or did you feel that he was minded to do it, notwithstanding what you were trying to persuade him to the otherwise?
Well, this was over the course of a month, and that included, so I went there 3 times, but I also talked by phone a bunch, and with him about this. And a lot of other people did too. To advocate for it. A lot of people. I don't think many people within the White House were advocating for it. Is my sense. Not that I would really know. I don't work there, but my sense is there weren't a lot of cabinet secretaries saying, "Oh gosh, we got to have a war with Iran." But there were a number of people from the outside who were all sort of visible. You kind of know who they are, donors and advocates for Israel who were advocating for it. And my sense is his view started to change, well, obviously it did because he did it, but at no point did I detect an enthusiasm for it. He didn't seem eager to do it. He didn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. That sounds fair. I don't have a problem with that. I don't want anyone to have nuclear weapons. I want Israel to have nuclear weapons. I don't want France to have nuclear weapons. I mean, that's a pretty reasonable position.
Question for the experts, whoever is watching this video, right? And this is a legit question because, I am not an expert in international law. My question is there an international law which decides which country is allowed to have nuclear weapons? Is there a law that dictates this country can have nuclear weapons and this country cannot have nuclear weapons and this country can have nuclear weapons? Because, for example, the United States, we know, has nuclear weapons. China has nuclear weapons. North Korea has nuclear weapons. But Iran, we didn't want them to get a nuclear weapon. So is there an international law that decides which country gets to have nuclear weapons and which country does not get to have nuclear weapons? Or is that something decided by, a country, like a big, powerful country who says, like the United States says, I don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons? Please, for the experts, please comment below. Also hit like, share, and subscribe so that the algorithm can pick up this video. But please, for the experts, if you can please answer that for me in the comments. Is there a law that dictates which countries get or don't get a nuclear weapon?
But the idea that you would go into some kind of conflict that could very easily become a ground invasion, or who knows what it becomes, a nuclear exchange, who knows? He was not eager to do that from what I could tell. And again, people tailor their positions to the audience. But I talked to him a lot. And I never one time got the feeling he can't wait to do it. But I also felt, turned out to be correct, that there was an enormous amount of pressure on him, like enormous. I mean, clearly there was an enormous amount of pressure. Where exactly did it come from? It wasn't just from Mark Thiessen of the Washington Post, who was calling a lot to demand more killing. Mark has a lifelong track record of doing that. But no one cares what Mark Thiessen thinks. I felt strongly, and I feel strongly now, that there were forces that were forcing him in this direction. And in fact, the Secretary of State, as you said in your intro, admitted as much out loud and said, Netanyahu said, we're going to go first, and you can either, watch your assets get destroyed and your people get killed in the Middle East, or you can join us.
See, that's what I was saying the other day on the other video I made. I believe the president was dragged into this war, even if he didn't want to be in the war. So I believe Israel came to the president and say, hey, we are going to go into this war, and whether you are participating or not, we're going all in for it. And what happens is we have this complex of being Israel's older brother, and we have to protect Israel all the time. So by Israel saying, I'm going to war with Iran, whether you're coming or not, we have to have that responsibility of saying, okay, I have to go and join you because, we are your protectors. I think the president was dragged into this, even though he didn't want to go into a war. But I think this is going to cost the president, the Republican Party, because the president, this is his last 2 years left. But the Republican Party is going to lose the next election thanks to this war that's going on. But let's continue.
The question, though, is
why at that point? I thought that was really, I think, a fascinating moment when Marco Rubio said that, because it prompted Antony Blinken, the former Secretary of State, who'd obviously done his job, to then reveal that Netanyahu had tried to pressurize both Biden and Obama into doing the same thing, using the same pretext of, we're going to go and do this anyway, are you with us or not? And of course, in both those eventualities, the answer was no, and Israel didn't attack. I mean, do you think, knowing that from Blinken, do you think Trump may have got played here by Netanyahu?
Well, I already knew that the Israelis had done that.
Definitely, Israel played with Trump and got him to go into this war that he didn't want to get himself involved in. So it's definitely it's on Israel to the fact that they dragged the U.S. into this war. Definitely on Israel.
In the previous administration, I knew they did it in 1973 with the Nixon administration, where they threatened to use nuclear weapons against the Arabs.
Again, like I said at the beginning of the video, Israel has been trying to drag us into a war for the longest time. They tried with Obama, they tried with Biden, they both told them no. They tried before in the Nixon era, they told them no. They tried pretty much with every president, they tried to drag us into a war. And Trump has been the only one who said yes. Everybody else told them no.
And forced Henry Kissinger to okay arms sales to Israel. So there's a long pattern of this. And I think anyone who knows anything about the Israelis knows that they're capable of this. They're capable of great violence. They take their threats very seriously, maybe too seriously, to the point where they become self-fulfilling. I mean, you could argue about it, but they don't mess around. And of course, this had already happened in this administration. In June, our bombing, the 12-day war in Iran began when the prime minister of Israel announced to the administration, I'm doing this week. And my question then, and I raised it, was how about no? How about no? You're a client state. You've got 9 million people. You're the size of New Jersey. You don't make operational decisions. And you certainly don't tell the world's dominant superpower what we're doing next. Like, why would you? That's like getting a lecture from your children. No. And that was my position, because that seems consistent with the laws of nature.
It's easy to say that, but when you have all the pressure of the Epstein files, and Epstein was a friend of the Israel government, I wouldn't be surprised if Israel came to Trump and said, if you don't help us go through this war, we are releasing this. You know what I mean? I can't say exactly what it is, but allegedly, with all the Epstein files being redacted, I think Israel has something on Trump, and that's how they were able to get through him so he could go into this war, allegedly.
The weaker partner doesn't get to dictate terms. Like, what world are we living in? And whatever, I'm not in charge. But that was my position. I think that'd be the position of most rational people. But Israel was in charge of that war. They started it, and they were in charge of this war. They started it. So this is a difficult thing for the people who advocated for the war to deal with, because their whole purpose is not to help the United States. It's to, and not even to help Israel. It's to help the prime minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. If you're loyal to Israel, if you love the state of Israel, what do you think about what's happening in Tel Aviv and Haifa right now? They just had, apparently, an Iranian rocket land right next to the Church of the Nativity. Luckily, it didn't do much damage. But this isn't helping Israel. There's no real end game for Israel here that's going to result in its long-term stability and peace. Of course not. This is a disaster for Israel, actually. Not that I really care, because I'm not Israeli, but I don't want to see any country harmed. And these people are in a very tough spot, because now we've left the rhetoric stage and we're in the kinetic action stage, where the rest of us can just assess outcomes without mediation. Like, who controls the Straits of Hormuz in 3 years? Is there an American military base in Bahrain? What happened to the Fifth Fleet? It used to be there. Where is it now? Who's controlling the energy flows out of the Middle East? These are measurable phenomenon. They're not susceptible to Ben Shapiro being like, whoa, wagging his eyebrows at you and telling you you're an anti-Semite. It doesn't matter what he says. And so,
wagging his eyebrows. That's crazy. That's savage right there.
It's them in a very tough spot. How do they respond? Well, we know from the Iraq War, not a single person is ever going to admit he was wrong. Ever. Ever. One of the most liberating things I've ever done in my life was admit that I was wrong about the Iraq War. And I was ashamed of it. I remain ashamed of it. But once you say, I was wrong and I'm sorry, this tremendous weight lifts off your shoulders and you don't have to lie anymore. And that is what liberation actually is. None of these people will do that. None. They feel no compunction, and they won't. So instead what they're doing is they're just going bonkers on the attack, because, and this is a precept that Israel lives by, the best defense is a strong offense. So rather than like debating you on the terms or admitting that they were wrong in their forecasts and there was no popular uprising in Iran and we've lost control of the world's energy, they're going to say, Piers Morgan, you're a Nazi. Megyn Kelly, you're a Nazi. And you're just like, what? That is a kind of insulation that they're constructing around themselves to prevent, well, any kind of soul searching about how did I get it so wrong? And all these people died because I was wrong. They don't want to deal with that. But it also allows them just like keep going on to the next war of conquest or the next satanic disaster that they'll back, which they will.
Have you spoken to President Trump since the war began?
I just through proxies. And they've acted within it, with wisdom or not, but they're still acting within boundaries that they didn't set, that no American did.
So he just talked about the president having a limitation on what things they can and cannot do. Understand this. A president is not a king. A president cannot make all the decisions and just roll with it. It doesn't work that way. In a society like ours, which is a republican, it's a republic, but it's also a democracy. That's why you have three branches of the government. You have the legislative branch, you have the judicial branch, and you have the executive branch. The judicial branch is the courts, all the way from the lower court all the way to the Supreme Court. The legislative branch is Congress, the Senate, and the executive branch is the government. Each one of these branches keeps and holds the other branch accountable. So the president is not a king. This has been one of the biggest criticisms of the president, who has been acting like a king, not talking to Congress to go into the war with Iran because he didn't deem it necessary. And it has been one of the biggest criticisms that the president believes that he's a king and he can do things without having to ask Congress, which is wrong. It's absolutely wrong. But I just wanted to highlight that. Let's go ahead.
And it's just time to change that system, not because you hate Israel or you're anti-Semitic. I mean, I'm not anti-Semitic. I don't hate Israel at all. I'm never going to. But that's not the way a sovereign country behaves or should have to behave. And Americans have earned the right to live under a government that makes decisions on their behalf for their benefit. I mean, it's that simple.
What Trump said about you was quite revealing, actually, because he said, Tucker's lost his way. He's not MAGA. MAGA is saving our country. MAGA is making our country great again. MAGA is America first, and Tucker is none of these things. And Tucker's really not smart enough to understand that. Now, having been on the receiving end of Trump's savage rhetoric from time to time, that is pretty low base for him. But it was an interesting point about what constitutes MAGA, because, of course, there are many people with pretty short to mid-term memories who can remember Trump campaigning so vociferously to his MAGA base before the last election on saying, look, we're going to be America first. We're not going to go marching into Middle Eastern countries anymore. We're not going to wage foreign wars. We're not going to interfere in other countries. And we're going to fix the economy in the United States. We're going to get the cost of living prices down. We're going to end inflation. And it seems to me that it might be that President Trump has either forgotten what he said or wants to try and reframe what MAGA really means. Because if you're a MAGA voter, you must be slightly mystified. You may not want to admit it publicly because you think it betrays Trump, but you must be mystified.
I've talked to several MAGA members, and all of them have said the same thing. We feel betrayed by President Trump. We feel that he played with us. He promised it was America first, which is the real reason why we voted for him. And he has done the opposite. He dragged us into a war. Everything is more expensive. He keeps spending more money. He's doing everything that a Democrat president will do. So I have talked to several MAGA followers, and that's what they have told me. So they do feel betrayed by Trump.
Within a year of winning back the White House, the guy that campaigned on not going into the Middle East again, not waging foreign wars, focusing on America first and the US economy, has now launched the biggest war in the Middle East in my lifetime that America has waged. And that has inevitably sparked the biggest economic meltdown we've seen as a consequence of a war, not least because, as you said, about the Strait of Hormuz and the damage that is inflicting, and the simultaneous attacks on the Gulf states and all the fallout from that. So it seems to me that he may want to come after you for not really understanding MAGA, but I'm not sure that many in the MAGA movement, if they're really honest, can be comfortable with what is happening here.
I mean, look, I've never claimed to be a genius because I'm not a genius. And so it's entirely possible there are motives I don't understand. I certainly tried to understand in many conversations with him, but maybe I didn't. I'll keep that possibility open. And as for what MAGA is, it's a slippery definition. I mean, I think George Orwell wrote a bunch of books about this, including Animal Farm. Definitions change. I remember someone pointing to a picture of 100% black people once and telling me that's diversity. Or thinking, looks like uniformity, actually. Like, what do these words mean? I don't know. I do know what America First means because it's a much more precise description. And it means you put America first in every decision that you make as an American leader. And this, by that definition, falls far short. In fact, it is by definition not America First because the administration has already said we followed the lead of a foreign country in doing this. We put their interest first. And I think most people, no matter how they feel about Israel, whether they love it or hate it, or it doesn't matter. It's nothing to do with this specific country. It has to do with any country that might be leading us around, particularly to our destruction, and putting its interests before ours. Our leaders can never agree to that, period, because it is the opposite of America First. So, whatever Trump said about me, I didn't take it personally. I suspect he doesn't really mean it because I've always gotten along with him for 30 years. I expect I always will. But
there you go. This is this is exactly what Trump said in the past. I could shoot someone in the middle of the street and my supporters will still support me. Trump just insulted this guy. And he's just saying out of his own mouth, I'm sure he didn't mean it personally, because the one thing I got to give to the MAGA supporters is that they are loyal to their leader. It doesn't matter what his leader does. They will stick with that man no matter what. You got to give it to them. They are absolutely loyal.
On this one specific question, America First, we can say this was not America First. This was at least America Second. I do think it's obvious that Israel understood, because they're not stupid, that the effect of this war would be to get the United States out of the Middle East. And unfortunately, I think that will be the effect. And they want that because why would you want a dominant power in your region telling you what to do and hemming you in, as the U.S. has to Israel? No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. We may not mean it, but we still hassle them or used to hassle them over, say, the West Bank settlements. They want the U.S. out. And
I actually believe what he's saying. I think the real motive for Israel to drag us into a war is because they want a clean house in that region and they want to be the superpower in the Middle East. They have the backing of the United States, and they believe they should be the power in the Middle East since they have the backing of the United States. I think that is one of the reasons why we were dragged into this war. Yes.
They're moving to India. Okay, that's their calculation. But how is that good for me as an American? It's not. So America First. Yeah, this was not America First. Whatever it was.
Well, what is very interesting is that I can't remember a war that once it started where American forces have been committed by an American president where there hasn't been majority support for that war in the United States in the polling. This is the first time where there isn't. There's a majority of a lack of support for it. Americans are not buying this war. They don't want it. They don't really understand it. And they're very concerned about the consequences.
The only people who support this war are those born between 1946 and 1964 who watch a lot of Fox News. That's it. I'm not attacking them. By the way, they're Americans.
Yes, the only people who support this war are older people over 50 and 60 who watch Fox News all the time. Absolutely agree with Tucker Carlson on this one. Yes.
They're my equals as Americans. I love a lot of them. But their perspective on the U.S. and the world is very different from everyone else's. Very, very different. And so they're not the ones who got Donald Trump elected, actually. The people who got Donald Trump elected are the people who hadn't voted for Republicans before or even voted at all before. And they're like Joe Rogan listeners, or people who use nicotine pouches. They're Hispanic voters. They're young black men. They're non-traditional Republican voters who voted for Trump because he promised not to keep doing the same thing. And one of the things he promised not to do again was to hand operational authority over to Benjamin Netanyahu, as other presidents have. We don't want any more of that. Why would we? And we're not going to like make Mark Levin or Ben Shapiro, who have almost no organic support in the media world, like no one really watches them. We're not going to hand control of our foreign policy over to people like that who don't know anything and who don't have America's interests at heart or even in mind. So breaking faith with those people, those voters, the ones who actually got Trump elected and whose coalition promised a new day in American politics, that's a big deal. It's a betrayal on the level that I don't think people who aren't in those groups can understand. Like, this is heartbreaking. And by the way, a lot of those people really like Trump. They like his style. They think he's hilarious. He's brave. You know, he's just like, they like him. And to see this is, it's so wounding. It hurts. I've got a bunch who work for me. I'm related to some, they're all Trump voters. And I talked to them in the last 24 hours. Boy, they're upset. They're not just mad. Like, I hate Israel. That's not the impulse. They're definitely starting to hate Israel. Why wouldn't they? Our relationship with Israel is hurting us gravely. It's getting Americans killed. So they're mad, but it's more than mad.
Yes, the war has gotten so many soldiers killed. And this is only the ones we know, because the news will tell us. We don't have the real number of soldiers that have died and the real number of civilians who have died because of the war. And we'll probably never know because that's the way government works. They keep us away from the reality so they can keep control. So let's go.
I can't believe he did this to us. I feel just so depressed about it.
How politically damaging could it be? We've got the midterms coming up in November. There were already a lot of reports that it was likely the Republicans would lose control of the House. Now I'm reading more reports that it may be that they even lose the Senate, which would render Trump, notwithstanding all his kind of mystical powers to avoid the normal norms of politics in America, if you don't have control of the House and the Senate, you are a lame duck president, period, end. There's pretty much nothing more you can do.
That's true now. I mean, I think the conversation has moved on from the president. It's not an attack on him. He still, of course, is commander-in-chief. He threatened some kind of mass destruction of Iran yesterday. It sounded like a nuclear strike to me. So, he has the capacity, to make decisions. He's the president, elected president. However, as a political matter, that era is over. For the reasons I just described. I didn't want that to be true, but the coalition is permanently fractured. He was not elected because of Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro did not get Donald Trump elected. A lot of the people Trump is now attacking got Donald Trump elected. Marjorie Taylor Greene, et cetera. So that coalition is done. The Republican Party, as currently constituted, will not continue, because it doesn't represent its voters. It doesn't even try to represent its voters. In fact, it shows open hostility to its voters. So nothing like that can continue for very long because it doesn't make any sense. It's a bicycle with square wheels. It's ludicrous. So the question is, what comes next? And I do think it's possible to recreate some version of the 2020 Trump coalition or the 2024 Trump coalition on the basis of his core promise, which is just put the country first. And you're going to make mistakes and we're not exactly sure how to fix certain things, but let's all try. And by the way, let's be united as we do it. The ugliest thing to come out of the Mark Levin controlled Republican Party, which I find repulsive. And I just want to say I'll do everything I can to stop that party from becoming, any more powerful than it is try to stoke religious conflict in the United States. Attacking people for being like a different religion. We hate the Muslims, really. How is that different from we hate the Jews? Well, it's not in any sense different at all. And I would say, just thinking long term about the United States, the greatest threat is not even the loss of the US dollar as the reserve currency globally. The greatest threat is tribalism, where the country fractures into warring tribes. And people like Levin are doing their best to create that. And it's totally immoral and dangerous. It will result in violence. Their endless harping on this anti-Semitism question is part of that. Anti-Semitism is immoral. It's every bit as immoral as anti-white bias, which is encoded in the federal government, by the way, and every elite institution in the United States discriminates against whites. That is every bit as immoral as anti-Semitism. That's every bit as moral as hating anybody else on the basis of their bloodline, because it's a universal principle. It applies to every human being. It's a human right to be treated as an individual and not be held responsible for the sins of your parents. That is a human right in the West. And
I agree with Tucker when he says, you know, whites are always being blamed for slavery back in the past, but a lot of these people have nothing to do with slavery. But at the same time, they benefited from it, though. Their families who own slaves passed their generational wealth to their parents, and their parents will pass that generational wealth to their kids. Meanwhile, black people who were enslaved had a start of zero, started with nothing, and then had to fight their way all the way to have a little bit of money, but not generational, the same generational wealth that white people do. So I can understand both sides. I can understand someone saying, you know, they want to eliminate the white race, but I can understand the other people saying, well, you had an advantage because your parents were slave owners, so they handed out or they passed the generational wealth to you, to your grandparents, then your grandparents passed it to your parents, and your parents passed it to your parents. You know, your grandparents passed it to your parents. So there is an advantage. White people have an advantage systemically from slavery over black people.
people like Levin and Shapiro don't recognize that because they are not Western in their orientation. They think that rights only apply to the groups they favor. And that idea, that evil idea, which was the basis of Nazism, by the way, that is the thing that will destroy the United States. And the next leadership of this country, whoever it is, has to articulate we're all American citizens. We must be treated equally under the law. Bias against one group is no better or worse than bias against another group, period. Anti-Semitism. Where were you when the ADL was openly promoting anti-white hate? So now the ADL is an authority on bias crimes? They've abetted bias crimes. They are currently abetting bias crimes. The ADL and every single one of these groups has an absolute moral obligation to treat anti-white hate, which is the only kind encoded in U.S. law right now, as every bit the threat of anti-Semitic hate. How are they different? They're not. And no one will say that until someone does say that. You will not reunite this country. And if this continues, the country will fracture.
As we're talking, with glorious coincidence, Ben Shapiro has been releasing various clips on his social media platforms. One of them goes after me and Megyn Kelly. Me because he blew his gasket about Dave Smith appearing on my show, launched into my show, said it was just Jerry Springer. As I like Jerry Springer, I knew him very well. I worked with him on America's Got Talent. He's actually a very smart guy. Used to be a news anchor, mayor of Cincinnati. Really interesting guy, much smarter than Ben Shapiro. So I took that as a compliment. But and I responded. He didn't like the response. He's come back. He's called me Jerry Springer again. He's called me a click whore. He says I'm a pussy bitch. And he goes on and on and on. I don't actually want to play the clip about me, because he's trying to basically suggest that if you platform anybody that he hasn't approved as a person that can speak about Israel, in other words, someone who's a propagandist for Israel who will not criticize Israel, then you yourself are promoting anti-Semitism, therefore you're an anti-Semite, therefore you're basically borderline Nazi. But I do want to play what he said about you, because he's been railing the same stuff against you, which I don't think anyone who has watched this interview so far will have concluded, oh yeah, Tucker sounds like a raging anti-Semite. He sounds like a Nazi. You couldn't sound less like either of those things, and yet he's just posted this. Let's take a look.
I started originally criticizing Tucker Carlson for his economic programs back in 2018. And then in the more modern post-Fox iteration of Tucker, I started criticizing Tucker over his going to Russia to sniff the bread and kiss Vladimir Putin's ass. My generalized critique of Tucker in the last few months has been, one, he hosted and glossed a Nazi, Nick Fuentes, which doesn't have to do with Israel. It has to do with glazing a Nazi, Nick Fuentes. And then I did a speech at Heritage in which I went through the fact that Tucker Carlson is in no way, shape, or form a traditional conservative, that he's a conspiratorial near anarchist at this point, seeking to tear down the fundamental ideas and institutions of the United States. Go watch the Heritage speech. I believe Israel is mentioned once in a 35-minute speech that is all about Tucker's general view of the world and how it does not represent traditional conservatism in any way. I think that Tucker Carlson has fostered anti-Semitism by having on some of the worst anti-Semites in America over and over and over, and then essentially laundering their views.
So it's the same attack line, essentially, about the anti-Semitism, which is if you or I or Megyn Kelly, whoever it may be, dares to platform anybody who is critical of Israel, let's be clear. I mean, in my case, I've always made it crystal clear, as you have in this interview, I have absolutely no problem with Israel, the state of Israel, with Israelis, with Jewish people, many Jewish friends.
See, that's the thing, though. That's what I've been saying. When you nowadays we cannot criticize Israel, and if we do, they consider you to be a Nazi. They consider you to be anti-Semite. They consider you to hate Israel, and they want to cancel you. That's what I was saying before. And you know, there's freedom of speech in this country. You can criticize whoever you want to. You're not inciting violence against anybody. You're just stating what you believe, and your beliefs should be respected. That's why it's the First Amendment to the Constitution.
Nothing to do with that. I reserve the right as a journalist to criticize any government, and I particularly reserve the right to criticize the Israeli government, given what it's been doing in the last few years, as any decent journalist should, not least because in Gaza, for example, the Israeli government continues to ban international journalists from operating there or even going on into Gaza to verify what they've been up to. That alone should be a warning sign to everybody that the Israeli government has probably been doing things in Gaza it doesn't want people to know. But I took the same view. You know, I oppose the Iraq War. We've talked about this before. But I led the media campaign in the UK against the Iraq War, even though my own brother ended up fighting in it. But I opposed it, and I think was vindicated by what happened afterwards, sadly. But I opposed it and took on Tony Blair, who was the then British Prime Minister, even though my newspaper was the Labour sympathetic newspaper, the Daily Mirror, to the Labour government. But I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. It didn't mean that I hated British people or my country. In fact, quite the opposite. It meant that I wanted to help the British people and help my country from stumbling into a disaster. And I sense from you that your position about Iran is not driven by a hatred of Jews or Israelis or Israel. It is driven by a sense that you feel this is bad for America and Americans, and probably bad for Israelis and Jewish people as well.
Yeah, I mean, I care about the United States. Again, I was born here. My family's been here hundreds of years. I care about it. I don't expect I'll be able to save it, but I want to do whatever I can to make it better and to avoid obvious disasters like this one. I don't want to attack Ben Shapiro, other than to say, like, that guy went to Harvard, and so did Bill Ackman. Like, at some point, you need to reassess. No, I'm serious, though. These are two of the most famous, richest people in our world. They both went to Harvard. I know them both. Not geniuses. Like, not even close to geniuses. And so, like, our system itself.
Question: do we have to be geniuses to go to Harvard? What do you guys think? Do you have to be a genius? I've known some people that went to Harvard, and they're not genius. They're really smart, but they're not genius. I'm just wondering.
Is not producing wise people or even very knowledgeable people. Like, Ben Shapiro had no idea there was a strait at the end of the Persian Gulf and why it was important. You need a system that produces superior people. The British Empire did a pretty good job of this. The United States before the Second World War did a pretty good job of this. We need to reassess our system. That's the first thing I would say. Second, you're right. This is absurd. I think I've actually even argued with you about Israel. I was taking a tougher position than you. You've been a defender of Israel.
Yeah.
That's why this is so crazy. He wants to talk about this in order to get, this is projection. You're all about clicks. No, actually, Ben Shapiro was all about the money and about the clicks. But here's the part that I think that we should be concerned about.
Ouch, he just burned Ben Shapiro. pretty much Ben Shapiro, according to Tucker Carlson, is all about the money, all about the clicks. So it doesn't matter. He's not really defending or having an opinion. He's just looking for clicks and money, pretty much.
It is now a crime in a lot of the West to criticize Israel. People were arrested yesterday in Australia for criticizing Israel outside, publicly, not attacking Jews, not attacking physically anybody, saying, I'm against the state of Israel. They're arrested for it. They're in jail tonight. That's also true in the UK, as you know. It's true in Canada. It's true throughout Europe. And Ben Shapiro and people in the administration would like to make that the law here. This is the last holdout of free speech on planet Earth, the United States. It's encoded in our Constitution. Also, I would say in the American DNA. We have a right to say whatever we believe is true, period. And that very much includes criticism of a foreign country. You'll never hear me saying from the river to the sea, because I'm not exactly sure what that means. However, if I want to say from the river to the sea, I certainly will. And I'll do that until I die, because that's my birthright. That's a right given to me by God, not the U.S. government. And Ben Shapiro and a lot of these people are saying it out loud. We need to penalize anti-Semites with the law. What does that even mean? You can never, in the United States, prosecute or even persecute someone for his beliefs. For your beliefs. You have the right of conscience in this country. The UK used to have it. Australia used to have it. New Zealand used to have it. Now they're going.
Yes, sir. The freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. You have the freedom of protest against government, against tyranny, against other people. And that is the First Amendment of the United States. That should never be removed. You should be able to criticize Israel. It doesn't mean you are anti-Semite. It doesn't mean you are hating on the Jewish people. You're just, telling people your beliefs. And I don't see absolutely anything wrong with that.
To jail for saying things that Ben Shapiro doesn't like. So we should be wary of this, because it's all preparatory to legislative and regulatory changes that will ban free speech in the United States. They're saying it out loud. That's happening.
I also think that the really insidious part of it, and there were many insidious parts of it, one is to silence people and to threaten them and to get them cancelled and so on, which is very hypocritical coming from someone like Ben Shapiro, who pretends to be the great king of free speech. But also,
care about your feelings.
Yeah, exactly. I ended my own monologue response to him by saying those exact words, which probably triggered his little pussy bitch outburst today, as he's called me. But I think the other thing that I find insidious, Tucker, is that there are genuine anti-Semitic people. There are people that hate Jews because they're Jewish. There are people that wish harm to Jews. There are people who still have Nazi sympathies, who think the Holocaust was a good thing. These people exist. And if you start branding everybody that's critical of this current very hardline Israeli government, with people like Smodrich and Ben-Gvir, who have extremely hardline views, if you criticize a government and you get branded anti-Semitic for criticizing the government for policies that many people think are wrong, then what you're doing, you're allowing the genuine anti-Semites, the genuine Nazi sympathizers, to just ride under the radar. Because, if you go on social media now, everyone's an anti-Semite, according to Ben Shapiro and these guys. Once everyone becomes something, even though the vast majority are not that thing, then the ones who really are that thing get to operate much more freely, I think.
That may be true. That's not my first concern. My first concern is the innocent falsely accused. Always. It is better to let people get away with crimes than it is to punish a single innocent man. That has always been a bedrock assumption of American justice and of justice itself. You can't punish the innocent. Of course, Israel specializes in punishing the innocent, killing the families of people they don't like. So it's not a concept that people like Ben Shapiro understand or care about. But it's the basis of Western civilization. So you do not accuse or penalize innocent people, much less kill them, A. B, this is a universal principle. It is not specific to one ethnic group or one bloodline. The principle is you cannot attack or penalize people, punish them for the sins, real or perceived, of their ancestors, period. And in the United States right now, and this has been true for 60 years, the only group that is routinely denied jobs, promotions, federal grants, college admission to Harvard, is Christian whites. And it's embedded in the law in the United States. We call it affirmative action, DEI, diversity imperatives, whatever. That's the law in the United States. And so if we're going to tackle bias, and I think we should, through moral suasion, we need to attack it equally, evenly, as a universal principle, because if these protections apply only to your group, they're not valid. That's just tribalism. I don't care, actually.
Yes, we have to preserve our freedom of speech, guys. We have to preserve our freedom of speech, and I believe it's very important that we don't lose that. If we lose our freedom of speech, we will lose our country, and that's the way I see it. So we are gonna leave this video right here. I hope you guys like this video. Please hit like, share, and subscribe. This is JC Diaz Uncensored. I'll see you guys on the next video. This was Tucker Carlson on an interview with Piers Morgan. I hope you guys really like this video. So I'll see you guys next time. See you later. Peace. All right, guys. So that was the reaction video with Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please hit like, share, and subscribe. Hit like and help us grow, help the algorithm pick up this video. And I really hope you guys enjoyed. I think it was a good video, a good reaction video, eye-opening for everybody. And I'll be seeing you guys on the next video. Thank you, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Take care. Bye.